It's worth stressing at the outset that officials say there's no immediate threat to the U.S. Capitol's transport system, but they say after 6 years of surveillance, they have evidence that Officer Young tried to send money in the form of gift cards to the terror group. U.S. authorities first interviewed Young in 2010 when a U.S. federal court convicted one of his friends of trying to join an al-Qaeda-linked terrorist group in Somalia. In interviews and in undercover operations, officers learned that Young traveled to Libya in 2011 during the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi. He carried body armor on the way in and on the way out, and he also has a large collection of weapons in his home, seen here. He even turned up to a police training session with his own AK-47 assault rifle. Young also talked repeatedly of his desire to attack law enforcement. Ironically, Young told undercover FBI officers that he was worried about being surveillanced by the FBI and advised them on how to avoid detection and how to travel to Syria via Turkey without alerting authorities. Now, the charge stems from his purchase of $245 worth of gift cards for mobile messaging accounts. The charges say Young supplied the cards to help Islamic State fighters communicate. He thought he gave the account codes to an acquaintance working with ISIL. That acquaintance was, in fact, an undercover officer. If convicted, Young faces up to 20 years in prison. Now, some have criticized this sort of investigation as entrapment. There have been similar cases in New York where the FBI have posed as terrorist sympathizers and helped convince the subject to plot an act of terror or aid a terror group, when in fact, the whole operation is a sting with no risk to anyone. That seems to be the case here, but the FBI knows that some young people are susceptible to ISIL recruiting messages on the internet, and federal agents sometimes use these methods to root out would-be sympathizers. The White House Wednesday, by the way, defended these methods.
We know that part of the strategy that is used by extremist groups around the world, including ISIL, is to use social media to try to recruit followers in countries around the world. We know that that certainly is true here in the United States as well. And the FBI and the Department of Justice take quite seriously the responsibility that they have to use the relevant resources at their disposal to pursue these investigations and do everything possible to protect the American people.
Now, the fact that Young was a police officer in the Washington, D.C. transit system and susceptible to ISIL infiltration is another worrying fact in this case. He was fired from his job after being formally arrested. Nathan King, CCTV, Washington.